it be like to be a fashion designer? You know, somebody who has their own clothing line and brand. What would it be like to attempt all of this when you're just 22 years old? Well, I do have the perfect guest to break it all down for us today. I spoke with an up-and-coming fashion designer who has, yes, his own clothing brand, who's going to be in New York Fashion Week later this year. And also, he breaks down what the job is all about as far as the rewards, the responsibilities, the practical elements of it all. And then too, what he gets out of all of this. So I do encourage you to watch this video. I do have the full conversation on podcast in podcast format. You can find it wherever you access your podcast. Just search for Life as a ... All right, well, let's get into it. All right, well, let me introduce you to Ian Urquhart. He is the founder and, again, fashion designer for his own brand, Ignis Clothing. And one of the very first questions that I had for him in this conversation was, where does he get his inspiration for designing, all the lines of clothing that he's dropping? He has seasonal drops. He has tons that is constantly coming out. So I want to know, where does this inspiration come from? And this is what Ian had to say.
If I want to design something for spring break, I'll do research on maybe a specific time period in Miami. So 90s Miami spring break vibes or something like that. And then I'll Google that and then find some images that I like. And then, just keep going down that rabbit hole of just oh, maybe there was a really cool thing over here in Miami in the 90s, but also what about over here in Mexico during the 2000s? You just gotta explore your options, I guess, and then design based off of that.
So you'd be looking at things like the actual designs during that era, as well as maybe color patterns and kind of scheming them up and bringing them together.
Just going back to the culture thing too. It's you got to go with what was happening at that time. Also just the colors that were key factors in outfits. And just what people were actually doing.
I don't know about you, but I find that really interesting. All the different elements that kind of go into finding one's inspiration when designing for clothes, whether it's culture, whether it's geographic region, whether it's place, all these different things come into play. All right, well, I had another question for Ian, and this one was centered on his brand, Ignis Clothing. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to dig into what that brand is all about. From my understanding, brands have their own personalities, right? They have meaning. There's something deeper behind it. They're not just visual elements, right? There's more to it. So this is Ian explaining what Ignis Clothing is all about.
Ignis Clothing is a brand that dismantles that cycle of perfectionism to promote your creativity. And I just really resonate with that because I used to just struggle with trying to be perfect and get every single little detail on the garments that I'm making. But then, I realized if I'm the one that's wearing this and designing it, it doesn't have to be exactly perfect. So, and I want other people to draw from that when they're creating their own stuff, whether it's art, music.
At this point, you might be kind of curious what kind of clothing Ian produces with Ignis. Well, here's him explaining that too.
To go along with that, Ignis is kind of a brand for creators to wear while they're creating. So I feel most creative when I'm wearing hoodies and sweatpants.
Yeah.
So that's what I really try to make as a designer.
Now, having your own fashion brand, sure, there are a lot of exciting opportunities. There's sort of this romanticized image of what it would be like. But the reality is there are still some challenges, and I want to know about those. So that's what I asked Ian, and this is what he had to say.
The thing you have to do to articulate that vision to a manufacturer is create what's called a tech pack. And that's one of the things that's given me the most headaches for sure.
FYI, something I uncovered in this conversation, a tech pack is a specific document that you send to a manufacturer that contains like the fabric that you want to be used, the colors, the dimensions of the garment, and all the small little details.
But yeah, that's one of the things that's given me the most headaches, just because you're creating something that doesn't necessarily exist. So how do you find measurements for
Yeah.
something that exists yet? And how can you articulate that to a manufacturer?
Off the top, I did mention that Ian is preparing for New York Fashion Week. So I kind of want to get a feel for what kind of preparations that, he's putting forth to be ready for that. And this is what he had to say.
So usually I'm in here just going crazy on the sewing machine for about maybe like 5 hours
Wow.
almost. Not daily, but on some days it is that long. And
Oh,
yeah,
so you're
just
putting it all together yourself then. You're constructing at least the
for
first.
this fashion show that's coming up. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
A lot of the stuff in the past has been screen printing,
Yeah.
which I still do a lot. But yeah, for this next show, I really want to focus on what I can do with my hands on the sewing machine.
From that last clip, you probably noticed my surprise when Ian was talking about the sewing that he's doing. And yeah, I mean, this shouldn't necessarily surprise me. This is another practical element to this line of work. When you're really going for it and you've got a big project like this, obviously that is a skill that you need to know. It isn't just the designing. It isn't just on a computer. You got to get your hands dirty a little bit. You got to get in there. So yeah, I thought that was really insightful.
When I first started the brand, I did a little bit of sewing, but I wasn't really interested in that part. I was really interested in the screen printing part. So I had a little bit of experience there. And then I took some fashion classes and yeah, I had to do some sewing in there too. So it just kind of built off that initial experience that I had. And then recently is when it really started to like actually come together into this thing that I can actually accomplish and make a garment with.
Okay, well, this last clip that I want to show you is about one of my favorite segments on the program, Life As. It's called a water cooler story segment. And here I just ask guests to indulge listeners with a story related to what they do. And Ian is sharing a really good one. I mean, this one kind of for me represents what all this hard work can amount to, getting some traction, getting some momentum, in really pursuing your dream. So here's Ian explaining the story.
It was our first time in New York Fashion Week, and I see this one guy walk by me in this rainbow colored Louis Vuitton outfit, and I was like, I recognize you from TikTok. And he was like, no way, dude. So yeah, we had some t-shirts from Ignis in a bag just with us as we were walking around. And we gave him one. And a couple weeks later, he goes to this Louis Vuitton trunk show party. And there were photographers there taking pictures of everybody. And a couple photographers got pictures of him. And one of those photos ended up on the New York Times. Nice. So, yeah, one of my t-shirts is in the New York Times.
Nice.
That one interaction I had.
Pretty cool story, right? Yeah, I really like that one. All right, well, I think we are drawing to a close here. And before we go, though, I would encourage you to check out the full conversation. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you access your podcast. I mean, there's so much more contained within the conversation than what I can show in this short YouTube video. And finally, while I do have your attention here, big favor to ask, please, 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 please hit that like and subscribe button. I mean, the only way that this algorithm knows that this content matters is by people interacting with it, and I truly believe, again, I could be biased, but I think it matters. I mean, this content can set people up and give them inspiration for what they want to do for the next 20, 30, 40 years of their life. So yeah, I think it deserves getting out there. So please, again, like and subscribe. Anyway, I'll see you next time. Please tune in for the next episode of Life as a